How do fractional CMOs hit the ground running? Hi, I'm Dean Way. Welcome to Fractional CMOs and the 90-Day Win. There's a lot of variety in how they kick off a new client engagement. In fact, there's so much variety, it's valuable to just listen to what opportunities they look for and what they tackle first and what they wish wasn't true when they start a new project. So let's find out. Drew, hi.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Dean. I appreciate the opportunity.
No sweat. Happy to have you here. Okay, Drew. So let's take a hypothetical 1 year engagement. Okay. We'll get the early wins in a minute, but like imagine you just started a new engagement. You're the fractional CMO. What like main one or two problems do you typically see, or even what one or two problems do you typically go hunting for at the beginning of an engagement?
Yeah, fair. Well, that's a tough question. I think you're throwing us a curveball here because there's so much variety. I think each
Yeah.
business is going to be really unique. So I think coming from a perspective standpoint, I like to come in knowing I know the least in the room. I think asking a lot of questions. I think there's some common spaces to hunt. Right, there's some red flags you may see, and having an extensive onboarding question list or checklist to go through. Kind of like if you're a mechanic going through a car engine, you'd be like, here's the common places to look. I think that's sometimes not one of the best ways, but being curious and asking. I know it's a bit of a scapegoat answer for you, but I think being curious and asking is really the first step to making sure that you're coming in to solve the problem they actually have.
Right.
I think some of the common places, if I had to give an answer, would be, is marketing actually aligned with your business goals? Easy to say it is, but are you measuring it in a way that it's aligned with business goals? Are you structuring it? Are you incentivizing the team in a way that provides actual revenue growth for your business, and so on and so forth? But I like to start there and work my way through the most common problems that you see around sales and marketing alignment to goals, analytics, because it's often the fundamentals that are missing before we jump into the fancy shiny new things to try out.
Right. And tell the audience a little bit about you.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Drew Friesen at Drew Friesen Marketing. I'm a fractional CMO, and I mainly work with agricultural and manufacturing businesses. Breaking into a new marketplace in agriculture is very difficult. The market is very tribal, which makes a lot of sense because the more expensive something is or complex the buying decision, the more trust that's involved in it. So it's just a lot of trust,
Right.
and it's pretty tribal to the brands that already exist. So hardly anyone wants to buy from somebody that they don't already know or familiar about. So it's really tough to get into the industry if you're an emergent brand, or to create great marketing that actually moves the needle on revenue. So yeah, branding is really, really important, and that's a lot of what I do.
Right on. And Trisha, same question. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what one or two main problems do you normally go hunting for, or do you just see all the time in the kind of clients that you work with?
Right. Okay. Well, great. Thanks, Dean, for having me.
Sure.
And Drew, nice to meet you. First time we've met. So nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well.
Trish Hendrickson here with Moxie 360 Marketing. We are a full service marketing agency, but I am a fractional CMO for with a strong emphasis in tech. And so, to your point, Drew, it's a tough industry to break into. I'm relatively new to the Austin area, which is tech heavy, and so I'm working with a lot of different businesses when they can't seem in the tech industry when they can't seem to get traction or they've just come to a stop. So, when I'm starting with a company new, uh, love what you said, Drew. It's so true, right? Going in and just asking a lot of questions and then really listening. So I find that as we ask those questions and listen, a lot of times, like what it says on their website with what they're really doing don't align. So that's interesting. Or to your point, again, Drew, is that are these the things you really want to be doing and are they making you revenue? Because the bottom line is, you might think that, offering service X is great, but you really make more money with service, Y. And so digging in, listening, and really finding that having a seat at the table is really important. And so, um, when typically when we come in and start, they're really excited, right? They're excited to see us. They're started to do, share a lot of information. And then as things go, with any bright, shiny new object that comes in, it kind of loses its luster. And so we just have to make sure that we maintain that seat at the table and that voice.
Okay, then let's pivot into that for a second. So we almost started talking there about like, so what early wins do you normally like to go after in the first, like, let's say 90 days of a 1 year engagement? So like, Trisha, what do you look for? Like what are the quick hits?
So is building that relationship, and not just with the the C-suite, right, or the people that are at the table. I actually go around and talk to all the people that are in the business, because depending on what it is, I mean, there's frontline people, there's backline, or back end folks. So really, that's one of the wins that I look for right away, is creating that relationship, and that's on an internal level. From a marketing standpoint, it's shoring up branding. It's getting things aligned, really coming up with a plan. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, right? And Dean, you and I could probably keep, Drew on this call for the next, or sorry, I should say Drew, we could keep Dean on this call for the next, 2 hours talking about the low-hanging fruit that we see. But it's really developing that plan and creating those relationships, and then just starting to move the dial.
Drew, what do you think? What if anything, do you normally like to do as sort of the quick hit early win?
Yeah. So there's definitely some tricks up the sleeves, I think, of anybody coming into an organization. The benefit you have is your fresh eyes on a problem they've probably been facing for a long time. So I think the first thing is having that curiosity and being able to have a fresh perspective on maybe something they say. It always has to be this way, and thus it is, right? And instead you come in with maybe a new perspective and a way to look at it. Tactically, that could look like, what's the onboarding experience? Like maybe being a ghost customer of the business and see, pretending you're a completely new lead coming in. What's the experience like? When do I get dropped off? Then going into the back end and see how that data is collected. Looking at email correspondence, looking at who gets tossed to a sales conversation, and what's that experience like. What the marketing looks like on a broader scale. Is it consistent, like Trisha was saying, with what the brand is trying to be and what the perspective is in the industry? So I like to take a pretty broad audit, but focusing on kind of the critical points around sales conversion, right? Starting there and kind of working my way backwards through marketing. Marketing can be very deep. And so if you want to deliver quick wins, you can just start as close as you can to the finish line, right? To the 10-yard line, so to speak, right? Starting with what leads are already in the pipeline. What kind of opportunities are right at the edge? How do we help them accelerate that deal or make it more likely to go through? What's the current experience with current leads? I think those are really good questions to start with and start to peer in at the data, because the reality is marketing is a mix of short and long-term investments, right? It's kind of like investing, where you go in and if you're a somewhat savvy investor, you're allocating your investments, your hard-earned money, into a couple different places depending on what you're trying to do, right? You're not just investing for a time, right? Maybe you're trying to buy a new vehicle for the family or your first home or something. And so that changes the way you invest. And marketing is a lot similar, right? There's this mixture of short-term cash flow and future cash flow. And most businesses, especially if they don't have a marketing leader or experienced marketing leader, feel pressed to always focus on current cash flow. And this is not possible for most businesses to explicitly focus on present cash flow and have a profitable revenue engine. It's just not the way. And I think we could talk a lot about why brand awareness is then important and how that works. But that's what I like to look at, is essentially, what are you doing for short-term investments? What are you doing for long-term investments? And auditing them so that we can make some quick wins with the short term, but we're also getting a really good understanding of, are the long-term investments paying off, so that we can make quick changes. Because if we're going to be in this relationship, like you said, Dean, for a year, let's start tweaking those things now, so we start to see the fruit of the labor that we've done towards our long-term investments since day zero.
Well, then when you normally start a new engagement, what do you see? What do you find that clients don't normally know about or don't normally see? I mean, it might be right in front of them every day, but they don't see it until you start working with them. True.
Yeah, no, great question. Oh man, a couple of different directions. But I think like I was alluding to before, is the incentive structures of your team, right? If you're telling your marketers that they need to get as many leads as possible because that's going to grow the business, leads are not necessarily indicative of conversion, or it's going to be a one deal, right? That you're going to get great sales opportunities out of it. Leads in some organizations that I've worked with are essentially vanity metrics, where we have this huge volume of leads, but when you take a look at them, they're really not showing any buying intent or propensity to even engage in a conversation with the sales team. They're just not ready, or that's not even what they were looking for. So figuring out what you're actually incentivizing the marketing team to fight for, whether it's revenue or the steps before that, and making sure it's actually aligned with what the business is trying to do, I think is really, really important. The other thing that I think businesses don't really understand is the power of brand. I think taking the example of, Trisha's in tech and I'm in ag or manufacturing, these are really expensive and complex purchases, and it takes a lot of trust. And there's a lot of data out there by Bain, Harvard Business Review has published stuff to show that if you are not in their day one consideration set, you have a very low chance of getting considered. If you're not, when someone has a problem or they enter the category and that, of a problem you solve, there's about an 80% chance that they're going to choose a brand that they consider day one. And that's a really tough thing for businesses to really swallow. If they're not the incumbent large brand on the market that people are going to think about first, you got a lot of legwork to do to end up being considered fairly as one of the options. So if you're a challenger brand, you're just starting out, or somewhere in between that awkward teenage stage of your company maturing, you got a lot of work to do to make sure that you truly get considered. And lots of that comes at the branding level that won't see some of that economy level marketing where you're just, it's a money machine. You put money in, you're getting money out. A lot of it comes down to awareness, trust, being known, liked, and trusted by your ideal audience as effectively as possible. And there's a lot of businesses that don't consider that as part of their marketing strategy.
Trisha, how about you? What do your clients normally not know or not see until you point it out?
Right. I mean, to expand just a little bit on what Drew said, is there is a big difference between marketing and branding. And so educating on that piece is important. There's long game and short game, right? And so marketing is a short game, but branding is a long game. So that is definitely one of them that I talk to. Being so heavy in the tech industry, it's kind of surprising to me that a lot of what is in front of folks that they're not using is the analytics. I've been in marketing for 35 years, aging myself a bit here, but when I started in marketing, we were throwing, a dart at a dartboard and hoping it hit. And it really didn't have the metrics to follow up and know what our ROI was. Well, now with analytics, we can just take a deep dive. And so if they'll say to me, this is working, I'm like, okay, well, let's look at it. And we've got the analytics and the metrics to show and say, well, it isn't really working, or what you thought wasn't working actually really is. And then taking a step back and doing it that way. And again, with the groups that I'm working with, it's to get them kind of a little bit out of their head, because they're extremely, all the people we work with are extremely smart, right, in their industries, but sometimes they just take a too deep of a dive, and it's like, all right, we need to make sure that we're keeping this on a level that everybody can understand, and there's a time for that deep dive, but let's make sure that we're getting the messaging out there for the general consumer before you take that dive.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's another hypothetical. You're a CEO and you're going to hire a fractional CMO. Okay. Trisha, you're the CEO. How are you going to squeeze the last penny of value out of that fractional CMO for that year that you've got them?
Well, this happens all the time, right? If I was going to hire, if I was as a CEO and going to hire a fractional CMO, I'd do a lot of research. I would ask around in the industry, do a bunch of interviews, see who you're going to get the most value with, who you really click with. It's really important that you click with the person and that they trust you, and vice versa, that you trust them in that relationship, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that I do is I create like a custom dashboard for folks for those analytics. And so there's accountability right there for me and my company to perform. So they see it exactly like I see it. I'm not pulling metrics out and putting them on a spreadsheet, and sending them what looks good on any given day. Sometimes I get a call that says, hey, you know what, last week, look at our Google My Business, not one person or our website took a complete dive. Let's take, why? And so they have that. So create it. And I think there's a lot of value in that accountability piece. And also, a lot of agencies, and this isn't, a diss on anybody, but forget that it's not just about sending these reports and doing the daily tasks that we get involved in. It's about maintaining that relationship. So I do require my clients to meet with me at least once a month so that we can discuss how things are going, what's working, what's not, discuss the analytics and, just really take that deeper dive. And they appreciate that because they are squeezing the juice out of it, right?
Right. And Drew, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a chance to answer one of two versions of that question. How can CEOs sort of get maximum value out of their fractional CMO, or how do companies waste the money that they spend on a fractional CMO?
Yeah. Well, I like what Trisha was saying about alignment. I really do think that if you're bringing in a fractional CMO, it's actually a very intimate role. Like this is someone who's essentially joining your C-suite in some way, right? Even though they're interim, it's a temporary role, but they're coming in and they're being a leader with your team. They're part of creating your strategy. Marketing really touches a lot of different pieces of your business. It touches the product, touches the customer, the current customer experience, it touches the prospect experience, touches how your brand interacts with the rest of the market and your audience. So there's just a lot of pieces that marketing touches. And I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that as a fractional CMO unless I'm really connected with and aligned with the rest of the C-suite that's hiring me. So in terms of squeezing the juice out of that experience, I think you really got to be meeting with them and having the tough conversations and hashing things out and being okay with disagreeing and really talking through the hardest conversations so that you really believe in each other and you trust each other that they're going to go about and do things that are aligned with the plan that you're setting together. So I think that's really important. And, the waste really is when that doesn't happen. I think that when the CMO, maybe the FCMO, maybe leaps into solving stuff before getting alignment. I've been there. When you see this juicy red flag or an opportunity to really show some big difference, and maybe you even got success out of it, but if you didn't take their internal marketing team along the way, if you didn't take their CEO along the way, or if it's a longer project, and you haven't gotten alignment, you may not even get to the point where you start to see fruit because you didn't get the buy-in that this is going to take 6 months, or this is going to take 9 months, or this is going to take longer to start to see real traction with whatever activity you're doing. So I think businesses need to have great expectations in the role, right? I think, like Trisha was saying, accountability is important. What are you tracking to show that it's working?
Right.
What are you tracking so you mitigate? I mean, all tracking metrics are very biased to the way they solve something. So how are you diversifying the ways that you're tracking, right? I won't go into the weeds there, but there's just a lot of ways that you can tell the story you want to tell if you choose a certain way to track things. So really being clear on your expectations together, meeting as much as possible. I mean, I'm saying that as a guy who, I don't want every business I work with to swallow my entire work week. But really, if you want to suck the marrow out of that opportunity, that FCMO role with you, you should be meeting with them as much as possible, not just leaving them to their own devices, working with your marketing team or the vendor agency that you have. Like you should be aligned. They should be your confidant and your best friend around the hardships of your business, and they're answering your questions from a marketing perspective. Yeah.
So this is for either one of you, both of you. Like you obviously talk to a lot more potential clients than you ever work with. It's just the nature of it, right? What's like for you the single biggest red flag that this company is not ready for a fractional CMO or should not have hired a fractional CMO?
Trisha, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, I can start with that one.
Biggest red flag.
There are some definite red flags. And one of them for me is, that we're detecting a theme here, right? Is that communication. If somebody doesn't have that trust and communication with me, well, I can show you that stuff later down the line and things like that. It's a bit of a red flag, because we really need to have those deep dive and hard conversations. And a lot of them are hard. I'm glad you brought that up, Drew. I think it's very important for people to understand that you're not bringing us in because we're bringing kittens and rainbows. You're bringing us in because something needs to change or something needs to happen. And so, which is another red flag, right? If somebody who says, I've been doing it this way for 20 years, I want to grow, but I'm not willing to change. Well, you know what? That's a big red flag for me.
Drew, what about you? Big red flag.
Yeah, I think those are really good ones. I maybe want to piggyback off of some of the things where Trisha was saying there. I think like the transparency to some of the numbers. I know I've seen weird, you may think this is obvious, but I've seen weird scenarios where the business leader won't want to share true revenue or what the profit was for the year, where they won't want to share what they're paying their employees or tech stack costs, or kind of hiding some of the fees within marketing. And then you're playing really blind. You just don't really know, is this really the best allocation of funds, just to blast advertising, or are there some really easy ways for us to recoup costs, or make more efficient spending decisions, or do we need to invest in our website versus something else? And if you don't know huge pieces of the equation, how much it actually truly costs to make something or to acquire a customer, et cetera, then you are making a lot of assumptions that could end up in a very dangerous spot. So transparency on some of the hard numbers, even if that's an initial hard conversation.
I had one guest on an earlier episode talked about going over this question. Their client, this is like, everyone's got like a bad story of a client engagement that their client wouldn't tell them which products that they made were profitable and unprofitable and by how much. Like they were supposed to treat all of them as if they were equally profitable, even though some of them were standouts and some of them were not. And not necessarily just the best seller, but like we make way more money when we sell 9 of these than when we sell 4 of these, or like 100 of these, right? Yeah. So like, I understand what you're saying.
It makes you wonder a little if they truly have the numbers, right?
Yeah, right.
Have you really taken that deep dive into that? Because like you said, selling 9 widgets over here may make you $100, but selling 1 over here makes you $1,000. You need to know that.
Yeah. Okay. So last question, also hypothetical. So let's say in our, scenario of a 1-year engagement, you're 6 months in, and Trisha, we'll start with you. You're 6 months into the engagement, and the CEO comes to you and says, "Hey, you and I are going to talk to the final round of candidates for the next head of sales, and then we're going to pick one." What are you looking for in that new head of sales? Like what are the red flags, green flags for that?
Right. So, that is something that's pretty common that we get pulled into, and a big piece of it is, and this is why we take those deeper dives, right, is knowing the culture. And so knowing that there's a culture fit is really important. Right. Bringing in a disruptor, for example, to a company that doesn't like that isn't going to work. And so, really understanding the culture of the company and then getting to know that person through the interview process. And then, really, I would ask a lot of questions. I'm come with a bit of a different perspective. I've been a business owner for 35 years as well. So I've done a lot of that hiring and firing, actually. And so it's, there's those questions that matter that really, like, hey, tell us about the history, and what you've done in the past, like what you've, show us kind of those hard numbers on your sales. And that's great. But I see somebody that's only focused on those numbers as a bit of a red flag, because we know in business, it's about building the relationships. So what I want to know is, everybody remembers a relationship and an experience, and they really remember a bad experience. And so that would be a big focus for me in that regard.
Drew, how about you? What are you looking for, green flags and red flags for the next head of sales?
Yeah, sure. I think the first green flag is the fact that the CEO or founder is bringing you in on that conversation. I think that speaks well of the founder, that they value your opinion and get that marketing should care about who the salesperson is.
Right.
And then I guess, in a similar fashion, the green flag for the sales team is that they understand or get marketing's role in the big plan. I think that in many ways, I cringe at maybe the term family, because I don't see it as a family, but as maybe more as a team or a sports team, that everyone's playing a different role on the team, and understanding how marketing connects with sales but are distinct, and how they actually play in a larger revenue team, I think is really vital, so that you're working together and you're constantly interacting, and sales is sharing experiences with marketing and vice versa, so that you're creating the best experience possible for prospects and current customers. And the best ideas are when both different teams are talking together and ideating and solving problems. And when a problem occurs, maybe at the marketing level or at the sales level, that's something that you can break together instead of hiding it and saying, we're not going to let marketing know we had this problem or whatever, or feeling insecure that we're not closing these leads. Like maybe it actually is something you can solve together. Maybe there's something you can work on together holistically where you're going to have insights that the other party wouldn't. So I love the idea of treating it more like a revenue team and less as distinct islands of sales and marketing.
Right.
And I think bringing in a sales leader that understands that will help that culture permeate the rest of the sales team, set a great tone, and hopefully then allow you to create a way better experience across the entire pathway, or the way that a customer would interface with your brand, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that wraps it up for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. Drew, we'll start with you. How do people get in touch with you, and who should get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I post every day on LinkedIn, or every business day. I save the weekends for myself and my little 7-month-old. But I'm there. Come hang out with me, engage with me. If you got questions, send me a direct message. You can find me on my website, drewfriesenmarketing.com, where I have my musings there, and you can get in touch with me. Who's the best people to get in touch with me?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'd love to talk with the CEO and founder. If they're not sure if FCMO is a good fit or not, I'd love to have that conversation, or just to be a sounding board for what their plans are for this year, or the significant hurdles that they may be facing, just to see if it's a good fit and just have that conversation first. But I'm also good to talk with a director of marketing, a VP of marketing, head of marketing, whatever the role is there. Because the reality is, if you're bringing in a good FCMO, you're not an adversary to the current VP of marketing or the head of marketing. Right. You're not coming in to show name and shame their mistakes or their pitfalls or where they've gone wrong. You're actually there to be an advocate of marketing. And kind of like I think what Trisha said near the beginning was, you get a seat at the table, right? And your goal is to bring marketing to the seat of the table, which maybe they didn't have before. So if you're in a role where you're a current leader in marketing, but you don't feel like you're getting a full seat at the table, or that your ideas aren't getting considered, or that you're not getting to be a larger part of the strategy of where the business is going, right, it might be good to talk with an FCMO so that you can bring them in as a fresh look, fresh eyes, and to be your advocate for the marketing that needs to happen for the business to succeed.
In agricultural and manufacturing?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, mostly in agriculture and manufacturing for myself. Yeah, of course.
And Trisha, who should be contacting you, and how should they reach out to you?
Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely. So, my website is moxie360marketing.com. And I too am on LinkedIn. Drew, I wish I could say I post every day. I don't. Yeah, maybe I need you to help me. So LinkedIn is a great way as well. I'm actually doing about 25 events this year. So if you want to hear about, some disruptive events and AI and marketing events and whatnot, I'd love for people to reach out to me and ask about those, so they can find me at those events. Who to contact me? Yeah. Really, honestly, anybody in the C-suite. But again, to Drew's point, a lot of times I get contacted by, somebody who isn't in the C-suite but has the ability to influence someone there and say, hey, you know what, we're in need. And so, and then we just begin with a conversation. I mean, conversations are free, and they are really, really valuable, going back to everything that we were talking about earlier, because I'm not going to be a fit for every tech company, and, they're not going to be a fit for me either. And that's okay. I'm a fit for many of them. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you being here today. I liked this conversation a lot. It was really good. So thanks
Dean.
again for coming here.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Dean.
All right. And thanks, everyone.